As the years pile on, an invisible weight begins to press down, a suffocating mix of being overlooked and undervalued that feels like a betrayal from life itself. You've poured decades into your family, career, and community, only to find yourself fading into the background, as if your sacrifices were mere footnotes in someone else's story. The sting of insignificance gnaws at you, growing sharper with each passing day. It's not just about feeling unseen. It's about realizing how deeply ingrained this disregard has become. Conversations once vibrant now feel hollow, your words dismissed or ignored altogether. Friends who once leaned on you for advice now glance past, their eyes clouded by indifference. But worse than invisibility is the relentless pressure to keep everyone happy, a Sisyphean task that leaves you emotionally drained and spiritually depleted. You've spent a lifetime bending over backward, twisting yourself into shapes that fit others' expectations, only to wake up one morning and realize, who am I anymore? Every smile feels counterfeit, every nod a surrender to demands that never truly acknowledge your worth. And yet, society whispers cruelly in your ear, keep pleasing, keep giving, or risk becoming irrelevant. It was in this crucible of emotional turmoil that I began to see the truth. Clinging to external validation is a prison without walls. To survive, let alone thrive, requires something radical. Letting go. Letting go of the need to prove my value through others' eyes. Letting go of the exhausting charade of perpetual agreeableness. This wasn't just self-preservation, it was rebellion against a world determined to shrink me into silence. Learning to live authentically became my lifeline, a defiant act of reclaiming myself when everything around me seemed intent on erasing who I truly was. The silent weight of envy and misunderstanding. As the years rolled on, Eleanor found herself increasingly entangled in a web of emotions that felt both foreign and suffocating. It wasn't just the physical aches or the creeping sense of time slipping away. It was the invisible weight of envy from those around her. She had spent decades building a life she could be proud of, a stable marriage, financial security, and deep-rooted connections with her family. Yet, these very achievements seemed to cast shadows over others' lives, stirring resentment she never anticipated. Take Margaret, for instance, a childhood friend who had once been Eleanor's confidant. Over coffee one afternoon, Margaret made a comment that stung more than she let on. "You've always had it easy," she said with a forced smile, her eyes darting away as if avoiding confrontation. Eleanor froze, the words slicing through her like shards of glass. Easy? Was that what Margaret truly believed? Did she not see the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the endless juggling between career and family? But as the days passed, Eleanor realized something profound. Margaret's bitterness didn't stem from Eleanor's actions. It stemmed from her own unspoken struggles. Perhaps it was Margaret's crumbling marriage, her mounting debt, or the gnawing regret of dreams left unfulfilled. Eleanor came to understand that envy is rarely about the person being envied. It's a reflection of the envious person's internal battles. This realization didn't erase the pain, but it gave Eleanor the clarity to navigate these turbulent waters with grace. Still, envy wasn't the only challenge Eleanor faced. As she grew older, communication itself became a minefield. Conversations with her grandchildren often ended in awkward silences. They spoke in rapid-fire bursts, their slang and references alien to her ears. When she tried to offer advice born from years of wisdom, They dismissed it as outdated or irrelevant. One evening, after yet another strained exchange, Eleanor sat alone in her living room, staring at the flickering TV screen. She felt invisible, as though her voice no longer carried weight in a world that moved too fast for her. Yet, Eleanor refused to surrender to this growing divide. She began attending community workshops aimed at bridging generational gaps. There, she learned to listen actively, to ask questions rather than impose opinions. Slowly, her relationships began to shift. Her granddaughter, Emily, once distant and disinterested, started opening up during their weekly calls. "Tell me more about your stories," Emily would say, her curiosity reigniting a spark in Eleanor. These small victories reminded her that understanding required effort, but it was worth every ounce of energy. Clashing values and generational rifts while navigating envy and communication barriers kept Eleanor busy. Another storm brewed on the horizon. Conflicting values. Her son Daniel, now in his late 40s, held views so radically different from hers that their conversations often turned into heated debates. For Eleanor, traditional values were non-negotiable. Hard work, discipline, and unwavering commitment formed the bedrock of her existence. But Daniel saw things differently. To him, flexibility, innovation, and self-expression mattered most. One particularly tense dinner stands out in Eleanor's memory. Daniel argued passionately about the importance of taking risks, even if it meant abandoning stability. "Mom, you've always played it safe," he said, his tone laced with frustration. "What's wrong with stepping outside the box?" Eleanor bristled, feeling as though her entire life philosophy was under attack. How dare he dismiss her choices, her sacrifices, as mere caution? In quieter moments, however, Eleanor reflected on their differences. She realized that Daniel's perspective wasn't an affront to her beliefs. It was shaped by his experiences, much like hers were. Instead of engaging in verbal combat, she decided to share stories from her past. She spoke of the hardships she endured, the lessons she learned, and the resilience she cultivated along the way. To her surprise, Daniel listened intently, his expression softening. Though they didn't agree on everything, mutual respect blossomed between them. This newfound harmony didn't come easily. Eleanor had to confront her own biases, to acknowledge that change wasn't inherently bad. By embracing openness and empathy, she discovered common ground, a shared desire to create a better future, even if their paths diverged. The poisonous whisper of gossip. Just when Eleanor thought she'd weathered the worst storms, a new challenge emerged. Gossip. In her tight-knit retirement community, rumors spread faster than wildfire. One morning, she overheard snippets of conversation about her finances. Some claimed she was secretly struggling despite appearances, while others accused her of hoarding wealth. Also, the accusations felt like daggers piercing her heart. At first, Eleanor considered confronting her accusers head-on, but then she remembered the lessons she'd learned about projection and insecurity. These whispers weren't about her. They revealed the fears and inadequacies of those spreading them. With renewed resolve, Eleanor chose silence over retaliation. She focused on nurturing genuine relationships, knowing that true friends would see through the lies. Her strategy paid off. Neighbors who initially doubted her began reaching out, apologizing for believing baseless rumors. Their remorse strengthened Eleanor's belief in the power of integrity. No matter how vicious the gossip, staying grounded in truth remained her strongest defense. Projection and personal insecurities. Another layer of complexity arose when Eleanor noticed subtle shifts in behavior from close acquaintances. A neighbor, Sarah, suddenly grew distant, her warmth replaced by cold indifference. At first, Eleanor assumed she'd done something wrong, but upon reflection, she recognized the signs of projection. Sarah's insecurities, her declining health, her strained relationship with her children, manifested as resentment toward Eleanor, whose vitality and strong family bonds inadvertently highlighted Sarah's struggles. Understanding this dynamic allowed Eleanor to respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. She invited Sarah for tea, offering a listening ear without judgment. Though their friendship never fully recovered, Eleanor felt peace knowing she'd done her part to foster understanding. Bridging the gap of empathy. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of aging was a lack of empathy from younger generations. Eleanor often felt dismissed, her contributions deemed irrelevant, but instead of retreating into solitude, she chose vulnerability. She shared her experiences openly, inviting others to walk in her shoes. Through patience and persistence, she chipped away at the walls of misunderstanding, forging deeper connections. Rivalry among peers, even among peers, rivalry lingered beneath the surface. Old friends competed subtly, comparing achievements and lifestyles. Eleanor resisted the urge to engage, focusing instead on fostering supportive relationships. Her authenticity inspired others to do the same, transforming competition into camaraderie. Defying societal expectation. Society expected Eleanor to conform, to slow down, to fade into the background, but she rebelled against these constraints, pursuing passions that ignited her soul. Whether it was painting or traveling, she embraced life fully, proving that age was no barrier to growth. Finding recognition within, finally, Eleanor grappled with the lack of external recognition. Her contributions often went unnoticed, leaving her feeling unappreciated, yet she realized that true validation came from within. By celebrating her journey and honoring her legacy, she found lasting fulfillment. Eleanor had spent decades bending herself into shapes that fit others' expectations, silently swallowing her own desires while ensuring everyone around her felt seen, heard, and valued. But as the years rolled on, the weight of this self-sacrifice grew unbearable. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was a suffocating sense of invisibility, as though her entire existence had been reduced to a supporting role in someone else's story. One evening, after yet another strained family dinner, where her opinions were dismissed and her contributions ignored, Eleanor sat alone in her dimly lit kitchen, staring at the cracked surface of the table. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. I've been living for everyone but myself. The first step toward reclaiming her life was excruciating. Letting go of the need to please everyone. For so long, Eleanor had equated love with sacrifice, believing that her worth depended on how much she could give without asking for anything in return. But now she understood that this mindset was a prison, one she had built herself. She began small, refusing to attend gatherings that drained her energy or engaging in conversations that left her feeling diminished. At first, there was resistance. Her son Daniel accused her of being selfish, his voice sharp with frustration. "You've always put us first," he said, shaking his head. "Why change now?" But Eleanor stood firm, her resolve unshakable. "Because I deserve more," she replied quietly, her words carrying the weight of decades of suppressed emotions. Over time, Daniel came to see her perspective, not through argument, but through example. When he noticed how much lighter she seemed, how her eyes sparkled with renewed vitality, he couldn't help but admire her transformation. Living authentically became Eleanor's guiding principle. She stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't, shedding layers of pretense like an old skin. This meant saying no when necessary, even if it disappointed others. When Margaret, her childhood friend, guilt-tripped her into volunteering for a community event, Eleanor gently but firmly declined. "I care about you, Margaret, but I can't stretch myself thin anymore," she explained. To her surprise, Margaret respected her decision, their friendship growing stronger because of Eleanor's honesty. Setting boundaries proved to be one of the most liberating acts of self-love Eleanor had ever experienced. She learned to protect her time and energy, devoting them only to people and activities that truly mattered. This newfound clarity allowed her to pursue passions she'd long neglected. A dusty easel tucked away in her attic became her sanctuary. Slowly, tentatively, she picked up a paintbrush, rediscovering the joy of creating something beautiful. Painting wasn't just a hobby, it was therapy, a way to process years of pent-up emotions and celebrate her resilience. As Eleanor embraced her authentic self, her relationships began to shift. Superficial connections fell away, replaced by deep, meaningful bonds with those who genuinely cherished her. Her granddaughter Emily, once distant and disinterested, started visiting regularly. They would sit together in Eleanor's sunlit living room, sipping tea and talking about everything from art to philosophy. "You're so different now, Grandma," Emily remarked one afternoon, her tone filled with admiration. "Different how?" Eleanor asked, curious. "More alive," Emily replied, smiling. Focusing on the present moment brought Eleanor unparalleled peace. She stopped dwelling on past regrets or worrying about an uncertain future. Instead, she savored simple pleasures: a warm cup of coffee, the scent of rain, the sound of bird song at dawn. These moments, once overlooked, became treasures she held close to her heart. Life, she realized, wasn't about grand achievements or external validation. It was about connection, authenticity, and the courage to live fully, even in the face of adversity. In the end, Eleanor's journey wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving. By prioritizing her happiness, setting healthy boundaries, and embracing her true self, she transformed not only her life but also the lives of those around her. Her legacy wasn't defined by what she gave up for others, but by the radiant example she set. A woman who dared to break free and live boldly, proving that it's never too late to rewrite your story. Eleanor's journey had been anything but smooth. For decades, she'd worn an invisible mask, a carefully constructed facade designed to meet the expectations of others. She had bent herself into shapes that pleased her family, her friends, and even strangers whose opinions she barely knew. But as the years rolled on, the cracks in this fragile disguise began to show. The weight of constantly seeking approval became unbearable, like carrying a boulder uphill only to have it slip from her grasp time and again. One fateful evening, sitting alone in her dimly lit living room with tears streaming down her face, Eleanor realized something profound. Happiness in her later years wasn't going to come from fitting into someone else's mold. It would come from embracing who she truly was. This revelation didn't strike her overnight. It was born out of countless moments of pain, frustration, and self-reflection. There were days when the sting of envy from others felt like daggers piercing her soul. Margaret's resentful comments about her easy life haunted her for weeks. Then there were the misunderstandings, those awkward silences during family dinners when her advice was dismissed as outdated or irrelevant. Each incident chipped away at her spirit, leaving her feeling more isolated and invisible with every passing day. But through these trials, Eleanor slowly came to understand that her worth wasn't tethered to how others perceived her. Her value lay within herself, untouched by external validation. Letting go of societal expectations proved to be one of the hardest battles Eleanor faced. Society whispered cruelly in her ear, urging her to slow down, fade into the background, and conform to outdated notions of aging. At first, Eleanor listened. She tried to shrink herself, avoiding activities that might draw attention or challenge the status quo. But one morning, while watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, she made a decision that would change everything. She would no longer live for anyone else's approval. That day marked the beginning of her transformation. Eleanor signed up for a painting class, a dream she'd buried under layers of responsibility and obligation. As she dipped her brush into vibrant colors and let her imagination flow onto canvas, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years. Painting wasn't just a hobby, it was a rebellion against the constraints society had placed on her. It was a declaration that her desires mattered, that her passions deserved space in her life regardless of what others thought. And oh, how liberating it felt. For the first time in decades, Eleanor allowed herself to prioritize her own needs without guilt. She poured her energy into what truly brought her joy, whether it was creating art, reconnecting with old friends, or simply savoring quiet moments with a cup of tea. But breaking free from societal chains required courage, and not everyone understood her newfound independence. Some criticized her choices, calling them selfish or unconventional. Daniel, her son, expressed concern over her decision to travel solo at her age. "Mom, it's dangerous," he argued, his voice tinged with worry. "You shouldn't take risks like this." Eleanor smiled gently, her eyes filled with resolve. "I'm not taking risks, Daniel," she replied. "I'm living my life fully. Isn't that what you want from me?" Over time, Daniel came to admire her courage, realizing that her choices weren't acts of rebellion, but expressions of authenticity. Living authentically also meant setting boundaries, a lesson Eleanor learned the hard way. In her earlier years, she had been a people pleaser, always putting others' needs before her own. This habit left her emotionally drained and physically exhausted, but now she understood that saying no wasn't selfish, it was necessary. When Sarah, a neighbor, guilt-tripped her into volunteering for a community event, Eleanor responded with firmness and grace. "I care about our community, Sarah," she said, "but I need to take care of myself too." To her surprise, Sarah respected her decision, their friendship growing stronger because of Eleanor's honesty. Through these experiences, Eleanor discovered the power of intentional living. Instead of wasting time and energy on trivial matters or trying to impress those who didn't truly value her, she focused on what mattered most: meaningful relationships, personal growth, and inner peace. She surrounded herself with people who celebrated her for who she was, not for what she could do for them. These connections became her sanctuary, a source of strength and joy that sustained her through life's inevitable challenges. One of the most beautiful aspects of Eleanor's transformation was the ripple effect it created. Her courage inspired those around her to embrace their true selves. Emily, her granddaughter, once distant and disinterested, began opening up during their weekly calls. "Grandma, how did you find the courage to start painting?" Emily asked one afternoon, her curiosity shining brightly. Eleanor chuckled softly, recalling her own doubts and fears. I realize that life is too short to live for someone else's approval, she explained. When you focus on what makes your heart sing, everything else falls into place. In the end, Eleanor's story wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving. By rejecting societal pressures, honoring her values, and prioritizing her happiness, she transformed not only her life, but also the lives of those around her. Her legacy wasn't defined by external achievements or recognition, but by the radiant example she set. A woman who dared to break free from the chains of expectation and live boldly, proving that it's never too late to rewrite your story. As Eleanor looked back on her journey, she felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the struggles themselves, but for the lessons they taught her. She had learned that true happiness comes from accepting and living as your authentic self, that your worth isn't determined by the applause of others, but by the quiet confidence you carry within. And that dedicating your time and energy to what truly matters, whether it's pursuing passions, nurturing relationships, or simply enjoying the present moment, is the greatest gift you can give yourself. For Eleanor, this realization was the ultimate triumph, no longer burdened by the need to please everyone or conform to societal norms. She embraced a life of purpose, sincerity, and freedom. And in doing so, she found a happiness that no external force could ever diminish.